might be somebody who could do it.
Charity Holden.
Yep. She lives in my driveway.
This sounds really bad. So Tim, just so this doesn't sound like ministry.
No, don't explain it. Don't explain
it.
No. Let it be exactly how it sounds.
We just put an intern. She lives in my driveway.
Don't explain it. Don't explain it. I
Okay,
love
fine.
it exactly how it was.
We're just going to leave it just like that. Welcome back to the Ministry Without Hating It podcast, a ministry of Odyssey Haven coaching and counseling dedicated to the pursuit of answering the question, is it possible to do ministry without hating it? We have a theory that it just might be. I am here. I'm Chad. I'm here with Brenton.
I am here. I'm Brenton.
It's Brenton, and it's just us today. AJ's on vacation, and we're winging this, and we're actually doing this is a very first. We're doing the intro before we even interview the guest. How novel, right? Normally we have a little recap of what we're doing here, but because of some scheduling issues, and as I just told you, Brenton, I own it. This one's on me. I double booked myself. We were having to move some things and be flexy, and so here we're doing the intro. And since we don't have an interview yet to debrief, I told you we have something we need to address, Brenton, and that's
what's that? Well,
let's just be honest, it's your In-N-Out order. If you're not familiar, friends, In-N-Out Burger, that's a fave for this podcast. I wish they would even sponsor us. Wouldn't that be a thing? And as you do, when you get to actually have it, being in the Midwest and you go back to the West Coast or wherever it is you have it, you send a picture to your friends, which is what Brenton did. And it didn't sting me because my In-N-Out quota is actually really, really good this year. I've had more than I was even anticipating, even with our West Coast trip. And in fact, I even had it about a month and a half ago. And so I was feeling good. But I noticed something, Brenton, when you sent me the picture.
What was that?
You didn't get it animal style.
Yeah. What's that?
No, stop it. Stop it.
Yeah.
Animal style, if you're not familiar, it's the hidden menu thing for In-N-Out, and it just enhances everything. And when I said you're missing your animal style, your response was what?
Yeah, I don't remember what I responded to you.
You said, okay, fine.
Did I say I'm basic?
You said I'm basic. And
yeah,
I was
I'm
like,
basic.
I'm basic. Exactly. Basic white bread. Sad. Just
I did get 2 patties, so double stack.
That's the double.
Double
Stack is another restaurant. Wow.
Man, these Midwest roots are kicking in.
Your roots are actually on the West Coast, though.
Yeah, but we didn't have In-N-Out there. Oregon is far from In-N-Out.
I'm sorry to hear that. All right.
Yeah.
Well, this topic is actually somewhat relevant because we actually do have a West Coast guest with us today. Today we get to have a conversation with our friend, Pastor Tim Lee, who pastors out in Antelope Valley in California. And so I know, just because I know him, even before even having had this conversation, that this is going to be some gold and some really good stuff for you. And so we are excited for you to hear our conversation with our friend, Pastor Tim Lee.
Tim!
Well, it is our privilege and pleasure to welcome Pastor Tim Lee to the podcast. Tim, thank you for being here.
I am a fan. Guys, I love the podcast. It is kind of surreal to be actually recording an episode of Ministry Without Hating It.
What?
I'm a fan. You guys are on my while I drive to work podcast regimen. Yeah, no joke.
You know how we made it in there? We only do one a month.
That's
and it does help.
That helps.
I was going to say it's because we saw you a few months ago and said, "Hey, we have a podcast. You should listen to this." So
you promoted. Your pacing is good. You have good guests.
Thank
you ask really weird questions. This is my kind of podcast.
We do. Well, thank you. Well, then let's start with the weird questions. Let's just get right into it.
All right, here we go.
One of our favorite ones to ask recently, it's a great starting point, is to have you describe yourself in 3 words for us.
Okay, guys, this I knew this one was coming, and it kind of has kept me up at night. Okay, so I think I have 2 words. One of them is the word conduit. That is a word that I think is a word that God has given me for my life. It's kind of an identity word. Chad, you and I have done some work together around like life statements and stuff, and so you're kind of familiar with probably like how I landed on that. But the word conduit is a thing that has something that is a pass through. So like electricity passes through a conduit to go kind of like to change intensities, or to like water will go through a conduit to change directions. And I just feel like that's who I am, who I'm supposed to be, is a conduit, receiving, like my life verse is, as Jesus says to the disciples, you have freely received, so freely give. And so I feel like that's my goal, is to be that. So that's the one word I definitely know for sure describes at least my desire for who I want to be. The second word is foolish.
Okay.
I'm wrestling with what it means right now to just become a wise fool. I had a mentor of mine once who said that his goal in life was to become the version of Yoda that takes Luke Skywalker, climbs on his back, and has him carry him around, and just like releases Luke to become everything that he was supposed to be. So I'm realizing that in order to do that, there's an element of Yoda that is so foolish to people who don't understand the wisdom he's got. So I think I'm sort of trying to abandon the idea of having all the answers, and just try to figure out how to be a fool. Not in the like biblical like when the Bible calls someone a fool, it in Proverbs, for example, doesn't usually go well for those people.
Sure.
But in the like, man, if I could live another 40 or 50 years and just become increasingly foolish in the world's eyes, then that'd be great. And then I don't know, man. I think the third word is the one that's really I've been wrestling with, because it feels a little bit audacious or maybe almost arrogant. But I would love it if people would think of me, and that the word friend would be like on the top of what they think. Like I just want to be a really good friend, you know. So
what about that as arrogant though? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think because I really wrestle with the idea of like I just know that I used to be wildly arrogant. I would run around and tell everybody how good I was at everything.
Okay.
And
so some past trauma with that then.
Some past trauma that I'm working through. I probably need to talk to your wife about. But
maybe, yeah. I'll set you up. That sounds weird. I'll set you up with my wife. Anyway, keep going.
No context.
You've heard nothing else. Go.
That's great. Also. I think, Chad, honestly, the reason it feels a little clunky to me, or I don't want it to be like, oh man, when you're with Tim, you've like, he's the best friend you've ever had. Like, I don't want it to come from a place of promise or, pride or anything like that. But I just really would love that people feel like I am a good person to be a friend with. That and that probably plays into some of the ways I'm thinking about leadership and ministry as well, which I imagine on a podcast like this we might talk about.
Yeah. There does seem to be a little entanglement there, but hang on. So I asked this because you're speaking to an Enneagram 6, and I hear that and I go, that's just what you do. Like,
yeah, but I'm saying that as an Enneagram 8 who is needing Jesus increasingly, and so I am trying to not say friend is a word that describes me, deal with it, but I'm trying to come open-handedly and say, I would love it if when you think of me, you think of friendly things rather than the bull in the china shop, the guy who's always got all the answers, the guy who's always telling me what to do, because that's what Enneagram 8s really thrive on. And I'm learning more to thrive on, like, if I can use my intensity to serve people really well and be a good friend.
I think it's just healthy self-awareness right there. So maybe if that helps speak to some of that, the lies or whatever. I mean, especially knowing what you can do, and that we've talked about this way before on the podcast. That's the strength to me in the Enneagram is it shows you what you can be, whether that's good or bad. It's not a justification of who you are, and so that's the whole point, is the self-awareness. And I think that's. Hey, let me say this. I would consider you to be a good friend. So
see that right there. See, that blesses me so much that you said that. So
wonderful. No, I honestly
feel the same way about you.
Oh, thank you, Tim. Let's just end the podcast right here and just have just a moment.
Can we fly? Let's fly you out to me and we'll hug. It feels like that's what we need to do right now.
I am a hugger.
Seems like a good use of our money. And
what? Of course it does. It's a hug. It's a hug. No, I honestly, in prepping for this, I've just been thinking back, and hopefully we'll get more into this. But there's been so many key moments in my life in ministry, just in the last, few years with you, that you have spoken things or helped draw out in me that have been so encouraging. So I would definitely put you in that spot. I think of Tim. He's a good guy to be a friend of. So there we go.
I'm blessed by that.
Oh, thank you. As am I. And with that, we move on to the hard-hitting question.
I feel like an awkward third wheel here, just like watching you two hug and.
Yeah, Brendan, can you go do something for a minute? Now it's getting weird. Let's just segue. Is a hot dog a sandwich? And make your case for either answer. We haven't asked this one in a while, so I feel like you're the right guy to ask this.
This is a deeply philosophical question. I'll try to answer it quickly. In the technical term, yes, it is a sandwich. Okay. I Googled what makes a sandwich, because here's what I needed to know.
Okay.
Does the bread have to connect? But if you put meat inside of a roll and the bread is connected in the bottom of the roll, it's still a sandwich. So it is technically a sandwich because the bread.
Subway, that's what they do.
Exactly. Right? The bread is still connected at the bottom. Yeah. But it is the kind of sandwich that when you call it a sandwich, it offends all social sensibilities. So it's like saying that a Celtics fan has good taste in basketball teams.
Oh, wow. Shots fired to somebody. I'm not one of them. So this is a Lakers fan talking, though. So let's just say that and address the elephant in the room.
Yeah. I figured, look, saying a hot dog is a sandwich is already going to offend people. I just decided to double down.
It really is. It's so stupid. It is a complex answer to a dumb question. And, every time it
says a lot about you. The way you answer that question actually says a lot about you.
It's true. Actually, when we had Andy Sloan, this is months ago on here, his answer to that was it was the protein in relation to the carbohydrate. I mean, he went into that kind of a thing, and I was just like, oh, I've never really thought about that. And he actually called it a taco, is what he said. So
I remember that. Yeah, I was driving on the freeway, and I thought that is an infuriatingly wise answer.
Mind blown. Yes. Yeah. Okay. All right. So you are a scholar. What is one subject, or maybe if there's, I'll give you 2 to 3. How about that you wish was taught in every school?
The super practical answer is music. I wish that every school had a really good music program. The answer that I think is probably where my heart beats is the nuanced practice of critical thinking should be the title of a class that every student has to take.
Interesting. Okay, can you? I know that there's probably a whole syllabus that you've created with that, but what? Maybe if you could give us the.
It'll be available in the show notes.
Okay.
Sign up for my master class.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know how to do critical thinking. So I'm a college professor, and it's the hardest thing to wrestle with deep ideas with students who no one taught them how to do critical thinking when they were in school. and the idea of nuance has been completely thrown out the window. I don't know if you have been aware, but in the world that we live in, it is increasingly divisive out there in those streets. And so,
I have noticed that.
Yeah. So the idea that you could like hold an idea and still be in relationship with another person who holds a different idea, or the idea that you might be able to come to a conclusion that wasn't just handed to you by fill in the blank news channel or Instagram feed, or
right.
I mean, even your teachers, right?
Yeah.
That you could actually like learn to think critically, I think would save lives. I think it would change the world.
That's good. Yeah. What a great way to neatly wrap that up. So in that same vein,
sign up for my masterclass.
That's right. Now that link will be in the show notes. That's an easy get. So we're at timestamp. This is November 6th. Tell us who you voted for. I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Don't. We have a rule in our house. We do not talk about Fight Club. And,
well, you had the perfect guest on for November 6th because I'm not an American citizen, since I'm a citizen of England and of Germany since I was born in Europe, and I'm a resident here in these United States.
Oh, wow.
So I did not vote because I cannot vote. So
interesting.
I, because of that, cannot speak to you about my political opinions.
What an easy out. That's
because of that.
Because of that.
Listen, we have a strict rule, like a period, and we actually have a men's group that meets monthly called Wing Club for Men, and we meet at a different wing place in town, and it's based around prayer, not just wings.
Sure.
But the number one rule, we have 3. The number one rule is no politics, and I've actually had to stop dudes from starting to go down there. I'm like, you're walking the line, because it's, I'm not one of these, we can't talk about it, period. It's just in those settings, it's just not helpful. It just becomes something that it's a fight. And
I agree. I totally agree with you.
You said Wing Club for Men.
Yeah. Just like
is that like Hair Club?
That's why I tell you, when we announce it, I say it's just like Hair Club, only there's wings involved. So yes. Oh yeah, Brenton, we started that. I mean, that's followed me from all the way from Rochester, Indiana, and then Indy we had it, and
I must not know you very well. I just miss the for men part every time. I mean, I knew it was for guys, but
I can even show you the logo. It's got the little wing on it.
It's all good. I believe you.
You know what? And then you talk about an easy. This one's for free, everybody. An easy net casting, because dudes can invite friends to that aren't believers, and it's a great mix. It's
a lot easier to invite people to that than it is to invite other guys to Hair Club.
And that's true, because that's like a subscription, I think. Obviously, I am not a part of Hair Club for Men, if anybody has ever seen my picture. So, all right, let's pivot a little bit. What do you find exciting, or what are you looking forward to right now?
Oh, man. So I have 2 daughters. Hannah is 17 and Selah is 14. And they are both in high school. Hannah's about to graduate high school this year and go off to college, which is nuts.
Yeah.
So genuinely the most exciting thing happening in my entire life is just watching these 2 girls just absolutely crush high school. They're brilliant academically. They're brilliant socially. They both are kind of discovering some leadership voice that looks unique and distinct for each of them. And meanwhile, they're like, Selah's a cheerleader and Hannah's a captain of cross country, and they're doing sports and leadership. And I mean, I could go on and on. I am the biggest fan of Hannah and Selah Lee. And so watching them just destroy life and love Jesus while doing it is the greatest thing.
That's awesome.
Yeah. How's that cheerleading schedule right now? I've got 2 in cheerleading as well. So
don't tell the Desert Christian high school football coach, but I was praying that they wouldn't make the playoffs.
Yeah,
they did. They made it. So good job, guys. But yeah.
No, listen, the high school, this is we have a freshman now. And the high school schedule is no joke. I think we underestimated that. Because my daughter's not a cheerleader, but she's in color guard. And we had kind of a similar thing of is this team going to make the playoffs? They did, but they didn't get a home game. So we were off the hook, at least with that. And then they got bounced, unfortunately.
You didn't have to go travel.
Well, yeah, we didn't have to do that. But also, if it's at home, it's a whole pageantry thing here with Iowa football. High school football, especially, I've just learned, which is fantastic. And I love it. But that eats up your Friday nights. And thankfully, the team has been good this year. So it was at least fun to go watch. But anyway, yeah, I can relate to that.
Yep.
So
Lord be with us.
That's right. Yeah. Amen. So let's move away from all that. And I want to maybe start off a little bit differently, because you mentioned you're a professor, but you're also a pastor, and you also have your hand in some other things. So can you give us your roles that you currently have right now, and then maybe even walk us backwards to how you found yourself where you are? I know that's a really loaded thing, especially knowing your story, but at least start with what are you into right now? What are your roles when it comes to ministry?
Yeah. Okay. So kind of big picture bubbles. I have been a senior pastor for, since 2011. So a little over a decade, in a place called Lancaster, California. And my wife and I co-pastor Foursquare Church out there called Life Church. So yeah, there's a whole long story there, Chad. You're correct about that.
Oh, we can definitely get into that.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll get into that a little bit if it's helpful. So then about 8 or 9 years ago, I started serving as an adjunct professor at Life Pacific University in San Dimas, which, if anyone listening doesn't know, Life Pacific, or LPU, is the Foursquare denomination's flagship university. We've got some other great institutes out there, but it was the one that was started just over 100 years ago, at the same time as the church, Angelus Temple.
Right.
So I have been teaching there in kind of ministry programs. I earned a doctorate in leadership and spiritual formation a couple of years ago, and then as a result of that, became eligible and was invited to become the chair of the Department of Theology and Ministry. So we've got a couple of undergrad programs, ministry and biblical studies. We've got an online program called Ministry and Leadership. And I am the chair of those programs, which means admin work and teaching, basically. But I love to get to kind of be at the helm and steward these incredible programs. And, anyway, yeah, there's a whole lot of other story there. But I've been doing that now for a year and a half, full time, while also pastoring. And then also, along with that, I am the director of a brand new initiative. We received a really significant grant at the university, and we were able to launch something called the McPherson Preaching Institute. We just had our first conference, and we're just blessed to be able to have some resources gifted to us so that we can create a place where we can train some Pentecostal preachers. So I get to be at the helm of that as well, which is mind-boggling that anyone would think that I would be good at doing that. And then outside of that, coaching and spiritual direction kind of happens kind of loose when I have some time as well. Yeah, I think that's probably the major things that I do, other than being a dad and a husband, which is come first every time.
So, I mean, you've got all this free time. It sounds like almost like we do
much free time.
A whole conversation on how you're actually balancing the rhythms and all that.
I have a spiritual director. That is how.
Yeah, go. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, is that your wife?
Ha. No, it is not my wife. Actually, my wife just started her master's program. So while she is also bivocational and is a master's student here at LPU as well. So yeah, we've got a lot going on. So to kind of touch on the answer to that question in all seriousness, Chad, I personally have a spiritual director, and then my wife and I have a friend of ours who does some spiritual direction as well that we talk to probably about once a month, that we're just kind of going through. The next couple of years are really pivotal for us, and so we just know that we need someone to kind of check in on us and make sure we're doing okay. So we're as a couple, we're doing that as pastors. And then individually, I'm also speaking to a guy.
Well, so I almost want to, no, almost, I'm going to pause here for a second because we've talked about counseling and coaching. I don't think we've actually really hit on spiritual direction and the obviously for you, it's something you view as a necessity, especially when you're got all these multiple layers. What does that look like for you, or how would you define that? And what is, more than someone saying, "Hey, are you okay?" Because some people can say that's what my counselor does. What does that look like, and why has that been so beneficial?
Well, I would add some clarity for the people, so it's helpful. I know you know this, Chad, because we've talked about it, but so counseling and therapy a lot of times was going to do the work of looking backward and kind of orienting yourself in response to where God was and has been, right?
Yeah.
Coaching is the work of helping a person look forward and kind of plan out, where do I go with Jesus moving forward in Christian coaching. And mentoring kind of does a little bit of that as well. Mentoring is sort of this like relational process where I come and what is the thing Andy Stanley says, like, I'm going to pour whatever's in my cup into your cup. And that's how he defines mentoring. It's not a bad definition.
Yeah.
But there's a kind of a coming alongside, walking together for an intention. Spiritual friendship is probably a really good other name for the spiritual director role. And that's helpful to me because it reminds me that there isn't really an agenda in this thing. So when I say I have a spiritual director, I mean there's a guy who, if he was my grandpa, I don't know that our relationship would change much.
Okay.
And he just kind of, and he could be, and if he was, I would count myself to be one of the most blessed guys on the planet. His name's Larry Spousta. He is he's just the perfect match to where my soul is at right now, in just needing a friend who is a little bit further down the road than me and who absolutely loves me and cares the most about me. And so when he is functioning as my spiritual director or my spiritual friend, he smiles a ton at me, tells me that I'm loved, asks me where I think Jesus is right now. And so I'm orienting myself in that relationship as I'm sort of on a casual stroll with a friend, who, and again, if this guy, because he's been down the road, if he looked at me and said, "Hey, this week I want you to do this," or "I think it'd be a good idea that you preach this sermon series at your church," I would take that advice very seriously. But that's not the role that he's playing in my life. The role he plays in my life is he comes alongside me and goes, "It's so great to see you. How are you? Where's Jesus? What are you praying about these days?" Those kinds of questions. And really allows me to be in the driver's seat of that. And here's the great irony of it is the relationship is working well. He just took a 3-month sabbatical. I haven't talked to him in 3 months. He texted me to say, "Hey, let's get set up for our next call." And it just immediately, like, my soul just came back alive in a place I didn't even realize that it had kind of gone to sleep over the last couple of months, just because he is such a blessing to me just to be a friend. And I'll go so far, and on a podcast like this, I know that a statement like this will carry weight. So I don't mean this to be heavy-handed, but I don't know if I didn't have several people in my life in the last 5 years who were that kind of friend to me, that I would still be in ministry.
Wow. Yeah, because your ministry, it's a lonely, it can be a lonely thing.
It can be, yeah. It probably shouldn't, but it can be.
I 100% agree. And I think, it's the value of that type of friendship. The thing I like to say is, sometimes we come together just to commiserate, because there's a certain weight and burden that we know, but that other people do not, because they're not in it, kind of a thing. Like when you get the Dear John letter, that kind of a thing. It's that's somebody leaving your church anyway. That somebody, you can have someone who can vent and understand from that side, that you're not, trying to obliterate somebody. You just need to get this out, kind of a thing. And so it sounds like with the spiritual direction for you, it's helped kind of keep you, I hate the word balanced, but at least within a healthy rhythm within that, would you say?
Yeah, I don't hate the word balance. I think our leadership culture makes us think that the word balance is not good. Um, and I think you probably are supposed to be a little bit more balanced.
Interesting.
And yeah, and my spiritual director is one of the voices that helps me to stay balanced. And I want to stress one of the voices. So, for example, like Larry has said to me, in every season, you're going to need a therapist, you're going to need a coach, and you're going to need a spiritual director, and you're going to need a pastor. And in every season, you need at least one of those, and in some seasons, you need all four at the same time. And so, for me, balancing that means I'm having multiple voices from different perspectives speaking into my life, so that my life can be balanced. But also, balance is I mean, if I'm not balanced, I'm falling all over the place, right?
Sure.
So I
Sure.
think that God wants me to stand, and having, put on the armor of God to stand, and resisting the enemy to stand, not to fall all over the place, and not also to constantly be running.
Right.
And so having a spiritual friend helps me to slow down. Having a coach helps me to run when I need to run. Having a counselor helps me remind myself that I'm probably being a jerk because I've still got dad issues. All of that helps me to stay balanced. Which I'm learning more and more is just sort of this resistance against like the Western, everything always has to be up and to the right in order for you to be able to call yourself a good pastor or minister or leader or fill in the blank, whatever you feel like your identity is wrapped up in this week.
Interesting. Okay, so I want to bring back something. I don't know if you remember this, but I often think of this, and I'm curious how this plays into what you just said. Okay, because you're kind of messing with me a little bit, and I think that's okay. It's a good thing. Yes, because oh man, I think it was actually when we were just starting our church planting. You had some of that journey already, and then had emerged. And
can I interrupt you by just saying whatever I said to you?
Here we go.
I'm sorry. I probably don't even agree with it anymore.
Well, hang on though. But it was actually pretty helpful.
Okay, then you're welcome.
And it still has been. Yeah, thank you. You can write your next book on this one. But it was you had talked about, and you used your hands. This is not a video podcast, but like this. And you said, I've just learned that with ministry and even church planning, there's just always going to be this tension. There's a tension that's always taking place, and just learning to live within it, not to resist that, because we often resist the tension that comes with that kind of a thing, but actually learn to embrace that and kind of, utilize it. So how does that play into, or is this one of the things you want to change your mind on, or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
I think, yeah, I remember that now actually. And I think I would still give the same thought, but I'd approach it from just a different angle.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, or maybe just use a different word. Because I think that the goal is rest, not tension. So like for the people listening, Chad, you just held your fists in like clenched, right? And I think
holding a string between the two of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And like, so ministry for me in my 20s and 30s felt like holding everything together. And ministry, so just for the record, I just turned 40. So this is also why I'm in this kind of like contemplative headspace right now. And I'm thinking a lot about life and maybe also death. And
we're so much closer to it now. Yeah.
Typical
40.
Yeah.
Welcome to the club, buddy.
Thank you. I'm trying to do it well. I've been 40 for all of like 6 days, but
oh wow. Wow. Happy birthday.
Thanks, buddy. But I think maybe now I would say, rather than the fists up, maybe the imagery is, it's more like sitting on the porch of a house. I know I've got a responsibility inside that house, and I've got some guests coming over. I really would like to host them well, but I can't host them by sacrificing what's inside the house. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yes,
like it's the duality of roles, and I should welcome people into my life and also take care of the things that are inside the house. Rather than this like tight-fisted, I have to hold everything. It's more of a, I'm sitting on a rocking chair with Jesus on a front porch, and this actually should be a little bit more relaxing than I think that it, than I used to think that it was.
Wow. That's good. That's good.
Well, it's also a reminder, Chad, that I'm not the one holding this thing together. I didn't even build the house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So now I'm going to need a minute it's really interesting. I'm hearing a consistent theme with leaders that we've talked to lately of something similar of just like you said, the slowing down, and maybe even the recognition. I love what you said, like I'm not even actually holding the tension, some of that's life, but it's, I'm not my own in that regard. And wow. Yeah. Just a really good reminder. I'm curious now, kind of walking backwards. Then you had mentioned you've already juxtaposed a little bit, that was then, this is now type of a thing. Mm-hmm. Walk us back then a little bit, and maybe with some of your story, you talk about the church planting and that type of thing, knowing what you know now, how that looks different, how you, the things that you've learned or would walk through differently, to where you are now.
Goodness. I think it's really important to preface that planting a church in your 20s is always going to look like ambition. And I don't know that that's bad. I think it's just a season of life sort of thing. So like I spend a lot of time with people in their 20s now, and I look at them and I go, you are a baby. And I was 27 when we planted, and thought I knew everything, which is wild. But at the same time, I knew everything I needed to know in order to have heard God tell me to go do the thing. So we planted a lot of with a lot of ambition. We planted with a lot of kind of gusto that said something like, we're going to be, the church that figures it out in our community. And then a bunch of people showed up, and God blessed and grew this thing more than our leadership was capable to, it was better than we were leaders, I think, is my clunky way of saying, trying to give God credit, but it was good. God blessed it. So, I can't look back and say, man, I wish I had done that differently. I'm glad that we made all those mistakes. And I'm glad that we got it right the way that I was going to get it right and wrong as a 20-something planting a church. If I were to do it now at 40, it would look way different. I don't even know that we would have a building, I don't know. I don't know how many. I would maybe hire an evangelistic friend and just go, you go do all this stuff. I'll just like sit with people. But that should maybe just a season of life that I'm in now. So it's hard for me to say, Chad, what I would do differently, because I'm just in such a reflective space right now that to say that I did anything wrong feels like it somehow takes away from the goodness of what God was doing then. The advice I would give myself is get a therapist and just stick your chest all the way out and do the thing that God has called you to do. But for Pete's sake, get healthy.
Yeah, do the work.
Yeah.
No, seriously, because Lindsay and I talk all the time. Nothing draws out every insecurity in you that you have, like church planting. I just going to be, and you can say that, you can probably copy paste that into all kinds of different things within ministry, but that one in particular for us, and we were older than that. We were in our 30s when we did it, but I would still say I struggle with the exact same things that you're talking about. The ambition, I actually said this. And I think this now, and I just go, what was I thinking? I'm going to start the church that does it right. That doesn't deal with all this, all the trappings and the events and all the blah, 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 the real church hipster vibe kind of thing. We're going to do it. We're going to do it right. And
well done.
And man, I still believe, I look back on that season and that God was using it to actually create a new humility in me, because we did not have the type of response that we made a lot of mistakes and people didn't show up until I was ready to go, all right, well, I guess I don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. I don't know if I would do anything different. I mean, there's maybe, I can think of situation and relationally things I wish I had done differently. But I needed the lessons to be learned within that. I'm also curious then with that, especially in your reflective space, how that has shifted even your definition. And here's the question of ministry.
Oh man, how do you even find a way to define? So like I've been thinking a little bit about this, knowing we were going to have this conversation. How do you define success? How do you define what ministry is?
Yeah.
First of all, let me back up for just a second and say, Chad, the church that you planted when you did was also like in a season in the history of the world. It was the church that your community needed at that moment.
Yeah.
So as much as you and I have changed, like the three of us have all grown in the last 20 years, but the world has changed in the last 5 years. And so there's another element there. Yeah. I think that plays into the answer to the question of what is ministry and how do you just define success. I think that if I were to say what ministry is and like what I think that it is now is probably just me loving God and loving people in public in a way that inspires other people to love God and love people. And if that results in what the Bible would call disciple making, then that's how you define success in doing that in ministry. Some of us in that world are called to be leaders of ministers. We in America call that a pastor, which is a word I think we made up.
Yes.
And made a job title out of something that as actually in Ephesians 4 is 5 jobs. But anyway, read Alan Hirsch's books about that. But I think at the end of the day, for me, I'm just learning more and 2020 and COVID and all of the social unrest and all of the change that happened in the church in the last 5 years and turning 40 and the season that I'm in and the place my church is in, all of this stuff is just getting me to a place where I'm realizing, man, it turns out this grand new idea that I have about how ministry should look and what it is and how we define it as successful is the thing Jesus told us to do a couple thousand years ago, which was just like, go make disciples and teach them to do all the things that I taught you. If I could just like unmoor myself from everything that ties me to definitions of success in ministry that aren't just that, then man, then let Jesus determine how many of these disciples I'm going to make. Then maybe I'll be all right.
Yeah. It's really interesting because we've been having a lot of the same conversations here with our team. And it started with not necessarily how do you quantify that, but how do you actually know that you're hitting the mark? You know what I mean? And so for us, it became, all right, well, how do we define the win? What's the actual target that we can actually say that we are living that out? And so it's a shift from, we're not saying the way we do church is bad. It's just, are we trying to hit the actual right mark, if that makes sense? Because if I'm doing it based on attendance, right, I'm going to live and die by if people show up or they don't, a type of a thing. Or is it more nuanced, going back to your critical thinking, right? Maybe it doesn't just look like that. And I love like that, just that word picture of unmooring myself from the way I think it has always been, because that's what gets you to hate what you're doing in a lot of ways, because I'm chasing after those things that I wasn't even supposed to be doing to begin with.
Yeah. So the most radical light bulb moment that I had what came in 2020, in the summer of 2020. I don't know if you remember some of the things that were going on during that time. It's
a blur. It's a blur, but yes.
No idea.
Yes. Yes.
So we're in the middle of meeting in our church's courtyard. We have this beautiful kind of Hispanic missionary style church building with a courtyard in the middle, and just we're so blessed to be able to meet outdoors. And our church is in Southern California, so the weather is almost always good for outdoor gatherings, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're having all of these meetings, and I'm suddenly coming to the realization that I feel so disoriented because everything that we did as a church got cut back down to, can we even have people meet with us? And that's when the Lord began to speak to me about the history of our church and my definition of ministry. So when we started the church, I had to come to terms in the summer of 2020 that in 2011, we did not plant a church. We planted a church service.
Oh,
and that's my friends, that might be the single most painful thing God has ever said to me. That we planted a church service. I learned how to do ministry, quotey fingers ministry, by being talented at talking and getting people to maybe remember. I'm not so sure that I needed them to remember in order for me to define it as success, but I definitely wanted them to listen to me say it. So if I could get you to listen to me say some words once a week, twice a week, or twice a month, and then you bring friends to listen to me talk, and then when you talk about me, call me your pastor. Other than that, I don't really care what you do with your life. Just attend. That is the ministry training model. No, that sounds really cruel, but that's the ministry model I was trained under. Was kind of the last hurrah of the church growth seeker sensitive movement, which I pray is currently experiencing its death rattle. But we just taught everyone to you're running a really good church if you have events. And I had a really hard time making a list of disciples that our church made. But I knew all the people that had been discipled by the culture, and that was really hard. That was rough.
Yeah. I've been making some of those same lists recently, and it's a shift.
Yeah, exactly. Because you learn what you're expending the sideways energy on. So Tim, where did you go from there?
I assume you mean once I came out of the cave, where did I go? Yeah. So I mean, the actual first answer is I went into a dark night of the soul, and deconstructed some of my own Pentecostalism, some of my own definition of leadership and ministry, and what does it mean to be a son of God if no one were to ever come and listen to me talk again. And met Jesus in that place. And I think also dealt with some just crusty stuff that was in my heart. There was a season of confession for me, really being humbled by God. Then once you come out of that, it's a little bit like walking out of a cave when your eyes have started to adjust to the darkness. So it's a lot of squinting and trying to figure out, where do I place my feet here? So where I came out of that was just leaned into relationships. And I had a church that is more gracious than I think they understand that they are, to allow their pastor to walk through that season. And those that have stayed have watched me kind of fall apart and put my life back together with Jesus in a new way, and have just loved me through it. And the real honest answer is, I don't know that I'm far enough out of that season yet that I can say anything other than it is dangerous and safe in these waters, or in that cave, or on the way out. I thank God for the people around me who have embraced me through that. Yeah.
Thank you for your vulnerability there. And even to say, I don't know if I've still got it all figured out yet. But that's the kind of thing I do think that speaks to a lot of people. And so thank you for sharing that.
Well, at the risk of allowing you to make me sound noble, any pastor who says that they're healthy already after what happened in 2020 is a liar.
That is the truth.
Yeah, we're not healthy. We're not okay yet. And we've gone through, and especially in America, the nation has not settled,
right?
And may not again. Who knows?
Right.
For some time, but it's possible that might actually lead us to renewal. So, if on the back end of it we get more pastors who are honest and say, I'm not always healthy, then maybe we have more pastors who don't just say, do as I say, while we're all secretly, falling apart on the inside.
Yeah. Yes. Well, and it goes back to what you talked about from the very beginning of just your healthy self-awareness there. And like, not to like, you don't like sounding noble. So I'll just put myself.
No. The problem is I love sounding noble.
Oh, okay. Well,
that's the problem.
Regardless, I think if there's anything that has come out of that season for me, it's that the self-awareness has increased, and I realized how much further away, especially the older I get. It's like I feel like I should have this down by now, but there's also the flip of that is though, well, I have to also still embrace the grace for me that I preach about that everyone else gets too, and that's a whole thing.
It's a beautiful thing when you get to step back as a pastor and realize that part of your job is to learn also to be a member of your own church.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking when men and women try to do that, but they don't have a church that knows how to embrace them.
Yeah.
That's why I genuinely am so thankful that God planted me with the community of people that he put me in. Because I think I was so messed up that I probably could have easily had people go, hey, you don't seem like you know what you're doing or want to do this anymore. Can we get someone who is excited to pastor? And they probably would have been fine and right to say that they were so gracious to me and loved me through it. And again, I'm not even sure that they did it consciously. I think it's just who they are.
That's amazing. That's awesome.
Yeah, I'm so blessed.
That's a gift. Yeah, it really is. That's good. That's good. So I not to just like jolt and shift away, but I think this does tie into maybe a little bit. You have recently jumped into the podcasting world this past year.
Hey, shameless plug. Let's do it.
A little cross-pollination is always a good thing. But you call it How to Church, which I love. So tell me, give us a little bit of the origin story of how this came to be and where you even came from that. Because I think as we get into this, we're going to talk about some of the things that you're still trying to recalibrate. Does that tie in? Tell us about all that.
My goodness, you're totally right. It is the perfect thing to kind of show a little bit of how I'm still processing while learning that sometimes the process is a gift of leadership that you can offer to some people, or a gift of ministry.
That's for sure. Yeah.
So the idea is, you guys probably started this podcast because at some point one of you said, all those fun conversations we have with people about ministry, why don't we record those?
Yep. Yes, it's a very, very similar origin story. Yes.
So the person that I had that conversation with is a dear friend, Jennifer Thigpen, who is, if you don't know Jennifer Thigpen, I apologize to you. She is a gift to the world. She's been a very good friend of mine for years and years, and just one of those people. I have several people in my life that I just sit down and I could just talk for hours, and so part of it just kind of naturally came out of that. But one of the things that Jen and I started talking about was how when the 2020 of it all, everything shifted. I think we were seeing there was definitely, like with the emerging church model, and just some of like the missional movement and all of that, there was a very slow kind of like turning a cruise liner kind of shift that was happening in the church, and 2020 just took that and teleported it into 10 years into its own future. And so now what we're seeing is some of the jarring effects of that, and just so disorienting. It would be as if you were on a cruise to an island and all of a sudden you are not on the boat anymore. You're just on the island. And now you have to figure out, oh, I thought we were boat people. I guess we're island people now. And then and you have some people going, what's an island?
Yeah.
And some people going, like, I quit. I hate the island. I was going to retire and die on the boat. And so all of that is happening immediately. So Jen and I started talking about, it would be a good idea if we could share some of our conversations we're having about what does it look like to do church or to be the church on the other side of that catastrophic, maybe even in some sense apocalyptic shift that happened in the church. And so it just is sort of like a question: how do you do church? It's a weird thing, and just trying to wrestle with that question. With a couple of people who are kind of just like muddling through, because we happen to be positioned as what you might call leaders within our own respective churches, and because we teach and lead other people and help people develop, we thought, well, let's have these conversations in public.
It's so I've had a chance to listen to it as well, and this is how you know it's good, is when I'm trying to talk back to you both when you're talking. In fact,
is genuinely my favorite comment that we get.
Seriously, like I was actually listening to it. I was having to drive my daughter someplace, and so I was listening to it, and she's listening to me talk to you, and she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, well, I'm giving them input, but
it's constructive."
I do want to say this because I love how it's got a very we'll set a link to it as well in the show notes, but iron versus iron. Iron versus iron sharpens, excuse me, not versus. I guess that's the same thing.
We might do an episode called Iron versus Iron.
Iron versus iron, and let me come on, and I'll fumble it then too. But as you guys have been unpacking these different things, because you go different topics and things like that, what are some of the things that are maybe standing out to you, or even you used the word nuances earlier, that you're learning in real time, even as you're processing where you're at personally?
Jen and I say a lot that we're surprised at how therapeutic it is. So part of it is just learning that we're not just having these conversations because we think you would be helped by it, but because we think we need to.
That's the same here. Same.
Yeah.
Same.
One of the things I like about this podcast is when I listen to you guys and you both just go, okay, let me think about what you just said for a second.
That's right.
I know that feeling. And you're like responsible. I'm recording a podcast right now. There should be the minimum amount of dead, silent space. But holy cow, what that person just said was really profound. I need to think about it.
Right.
So
right.
I know that feeling because Jen has corrected me in the middle of our podcast more than once, where I've said something and she's been like, let me push back on that a little bit. And that right there, that moment is the gold.
Yeah.
So I'm learning that opening myself up to those conversations when other people are listening does a thing to me. And it's really good for me to put myself in that position where I have to learn in public in front of people, because it's doing the thing of helping people know how to have a conversation. And that then leads me to this other thing that's been really surprising, is just the number of people that go, man, you guys are having the conversations that I wish I was having, or that I could talk with somebody about. Or I think we get the comment back that people say, I'm giving you feedback while I'm listening, not because we are such wonderful conversationalists, but because we just are like stumbling on these topics that we're asking the questions that we're asking as pastors, right? And so of course other pastors are going, oh gosh, yeah, I really have thoughts and feelings about that.
Yeah.
So I'm learning that we seem to be onto something. So we just are going to keep going.
It's good.
I could go on. I feel like I'm learning more than I'm being a benefit to anybody.
Yeah, no, Brent and I say the same thing. We'll get off. We're just like, I don't care if anybody else listens to that. That's what I needed now. Yeah.
Yeah. My favorite episode of our podcast has the lowest listening count.
Yep. I usually watch with or engage with a notepad, and I'm writing down other questions that I have that aren't really good for this what we're doing right here. But I have questions that cause me to go and read a book or go think outside of this podcast. So, yeah.
Well, and I would also agree with what you said earlier about people, they resonate with things. It's one of my favorite comments that I have heard for us. And I would say the same for you guys, is that I actually feel seen, like somebody else gets this, or they see, you know what I mean? It's that whole commiserating thing we talked about earlier. We need one another in that. And so thank you for, jumping in and doing it, because I do think it's a great resource, and it's helping you work some things out too. So
we have a whole set of conversations that we have put together that are going to start coming out soon on calling. That is really good. I just kept having conversations with people about, like, what is a calling? What does it mean to be called?
Yeah.
So we're wrestling with that a little bit right now in some of the recordings we're doing, and I'm finding, like, I needed to know the answer to that question. I thought I knew. So there's some really good, helpful stuff there that I'm excited to share.
Wow.
Shameless plug for season 2.
I said no spoiler alert here. You're gonna tease us some more, or?
I mean, I'll just tell you that the next episode that comes out is literally called "What Is a Calling?"
Yeah.
And then we're gonna get into Parker Palmer's book, "Let Your Life Speak," a little bit.
Oh yeah.
That's a great book. So we'll have a conversation coming up about that. And other than that, I mean, subscribe, tell your friends.
Here's your shame. When does season 2 start? When does it drop?
We are trying to get season 2 to come out before Thanksgiving of 2024, and we're following your lead. We were trying to do a weekly upload, but we're probably going to go once a month after that, just because balance. And I want to not start to not want a podcast. So.
That's right. That's what we actually said. We had the same joke. This is not podcasting. We don't want to hate podcasting without hating it. So it's
right. Yes. Yeah.
No, the rhythm thing, that was our same thing. I would love to do this every week. This is one of my favorite things. It's not only is it therapy, it's actually a creative outlet for me as well, and I love doing it. But it's that whole. The other joke is the whole ministry thing keeps getting in the way of my podcast about ministry, and so
I know, right? Jeez.
We've got to layer that a little bit. So within that, then, as you're walking through this, what are some of your current thoughts then on the state of the church? And I know this is probably one of those loaded questions, because I hate the whole blanket. You know what I mean? We all get lumped into these different camps and that kind of a thing. But maybe talk about some of the things that you love seeing right now. Maybe some things you don't love, and maybe some of the things that really inspire you, encourage you as you look ahead.
All right. Let me say a couple of things I don't love, and then I'll say something hopeful at the end so that we don't all end up crying. But
that's good.
What I don't love is how the church in America has forgotten the Bible. I don't love that we are marrying our identity to humans so much, especially humans who are nothing like Jesus. I don't love that. I don't love that we think that to be an American is to be a Christian. I don't love that we seem to value genuine expressions of disciple making more or less, rather, that we value those things less than buildings and crowd size. So I don't love those things. I just read a book. Let me take a little bit of a risk, but I'm the guest on the podcast, so you can say this wasn't your idea.
Does not represent the thoughts and views.
Yeah, I just finished reading a book called "The Violent Take It by Force," and it is about it's about how the independent, radical, neo-Pentecostal movement had a significant hand in the divisive culture that we currently live in America. There's some historical events that happened in the first month of January 2020. There was some stuff that happened.
I think I know what you're talking about, but yeah. Continue. Yeah.
And I'm in no way making a political comment there.
Right.
But simply to say that the way that Pentecostalism has married itself to politics is akin to it's witchcraft. And I think we need to unlearn that what we don't need is a sorcerer with lots of power, and we don't need to define prophecy as telling God what he has to do. And then moving the goalposts so that we don't turn into heretics. So that sort of stuff, like within the Pentecostal vibe, I'm going to use a strong word. I hate that. And so that's what led me to do. I made a comment earlier about how I deconstructed my own Pentecostalism, kind of put it back together again. It's because I had to realize if that's what it means to be Pentecostal, I don't want anything to do with that. But I want to know and love and be known by the Holy Spirit of God. And I want to see him move in power, not me move in power. So anytime that I'm trying to use the Holy Spirit to move in my power, that's what I hate. And I'm seeing that happen in the church in America, and I cannot stand it.
Yeah.
So that's that. What I love is that God seems to be so at peace with the idea that even the gates of hell would not prevail against his church, that he seems to know how to use things like politics and the dangerous stuff there, and global pandemic and all of that kind of stuff. He seems to know how to use that to bring the church to reckoning and hopefully to repentance. And so I love that I'm seeing genuine expressions of the Church of Jesus Christ thrive and learn to redefine itself or herself back to a scriptural framework for what does it mean to be the church. And in the midst of that, the final hopeful thing that I'm really loving now, because I get to spend a lot of time with young adults who feel a call to ministry. I love how tactile Gen Z and Gen Alpha wants to be with their faith. They don't want just performance. They want to get in the weeds with spiritual disciplines. They want paper Bibles. They want spiritual friendship. They want genuine community. And so when all of us curmudgeon-y people say, maybe it's not all about lights and smoke machines, and we feel like we're saying something radical, Gen Z looks at us and goes, yeah, you guys made it about lights and smoke machines? How stupid. So I love that they just are already there. We had to deconstruct some stuff to get to that place, and they actually are primed to lead the church into her future. I love watching them learn how to do that.
Yeah. That's good. So Tim, we were kind of talking a little bit about this just a second ago. And so the name, you talk about the origin stories, the names of podcasts, ours came from, it was actually me. I got off of a coaching call. I was working on my coaching hours with somebody, another ministry leader, and I was having to walk through a hard time, and they're just real down, and you're trying to coach, but also you're trying to encourage at the same time. And I remember getting off the phone. This was during 2020. That's when all the podcasts that are relevant now were born, right? Yeah, because we're super relevant and we're up there anyways. But you hear that story. They came out of the pandemic 2020 type of thing. And I remember saying to myself, man, I wonder if you can do this without hating it. And that's where it was like a lightning, like, that's it. I'll just interview my friends and we'll just figure this out together, kind of a thing. And you said you wanted to talk about, like you said, the word hate, and you had a thought. And as we're wrapping things up, maybe we're not, and I don't know it yet. I'm curious, curious what that sparked in you.
I really just want to preface this by saying I love the name of this podcast and I love that story. But I just finished reading Dr. A.J. Swoboda's newest book, The Gift of Thorns. And when I got to a section in that book, it's towards the end, he talks about the emotions of God. And this book is about desires and what do we do with our desires and all that. It's such a good book. Everyone should read it. AJ says this thing in this book about hate, and he actually says, as Christians, we put hate on the shelf, and we say it's a bad thing. We should never hate. And AJ makes the claim that hate is not the opposite of love. That hate is actually an expression of passion, and therefore hate is an expression of love.
Oh, interesting.
AJ then says, and I immediately thought of the two of you, and I thought of this podcast. I'm not kidding. As soon as I got to this, I thought of this podcast. AJ says, the opposite of love is not hate. The opposite of love is apathy. And then he goes, think about and some of this is my own kind of brain trailed off and thought about this too, but he kind of digs into it a bit more. But imagine God hating you. He hates, for example, divorce, right? It's a biblical model. He hates divorce. It doesn't mean that he condemns divorced people. He hates divorce because he is passionately in love with people. And so divorce, because it is such a tearing, breaking thing, he hates it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that proves to you that he loves.
Yeah.
What you don't want is for God to be apathetic about you.
Yeah.
Right? Like I would love that when I sin, God goes, Tim, I hate that. I hate that you did that, right? And why do I hate that? Because I love you so much. The last thing I want is for when I sin that God goes, whatever.
Lost cause.
Yeah.
So ministry without apathy is what you just said.
I think ministry without hating it is such a good podcast title that you shouldn't even think about changing it. But
okay, got it.
That said, I think I hate ministry sometimes.
That is so good. We should just, all right. Well, thank you, Tim, for being on today.
It's been fun.
No, you know what? I agree. I mean, like I said, I had a situation just yesterday. You know what I mean? I'm just like, in what other social setting do people act a fool? And I'll use it in the proverb sense, like, like they do within the church sometimes, within ministry, and I'm just supposed to just sit back and take it. You know what I mean? So it's like, I hate that, and
I hate that. And God says, yeah, I hate that too.
Yeah,
absolutely hate that. I hate that I would pour my life out for people and that they don't become more like Jesus. I hate that. I hate that you can preach a really good sermon on repentance and everyone in the room is thinking about somebody else.
That's right.
I hate that. I hate that.
Yeah,
right?
That's good. Yeah.
I hate that every time I talk about money, people are like, oh, all you ever talk about is money. When I could literally point out on just a couple of hands the number of times I've talked about money from the pulpit. I hate that. Right.
Yeah.
But I hate it because it reveals that you love something more than Jesus. And I knew when I was in trouble as a pastor, when I sat in my office and said, I don't think I want to do this anymore. That's when I knew I was in danger. I wasn't in danger of quitting when I was super angry. I was in danger of quitting when I thought it would just be easier just to not care about this. But I had friends who came around me and reminded me of the good stuff and made me, like, they helped kind of turn the light bulb on some things I was still passionate about. And that was just enough to get me through that season of almost becoming apathetic And then over time, it turned that apathy into some hatred, some anger, right? Some righteous indignation. So that then I could go work on those things and tweak those things and bring the church closer to Jesus. And we're really struggling at doing that, but that's because we're working with people. And you know what? I hate that sometimes. But when young people or old people or whatever people suddenly begin to look more like Jesus without you having to pick them up and put them in front of him and go behave like Jesus. When they learn to do that, that's worth all of those light and dark emotions, right?
Yeah.
I just don't want to I don't want my hatred to produce apathy.
Yeah. That's good. Yet another moment, Tim, where you hit me right where I'm at, honestly, within that. And I know it started as a kind of a light thing, but you're right. When we want to hit the button of I'm out, you know what I mean? It would be easier to not care. And what I love is that even leading into this, you've already given us the things that have helped you to make it to that space to where I can even have the self-awareness of I need to do something different, or something's not right, or XYZ, but then give permission to go, yeah, I hate that too. And there's no better way to end this episode than to just say thank you for that. And so that was really, really good. I'm going to be sitting with this one for a little bit. So thank you.
It's the weirdest episode when you're about to end with, so on our podcast, we always end with a blessing. So if I were to end with a blessing for the pastors listening, it would be,
do it.
May you go be full of hate.
I love it. Anyway, I just feel like we're allowed to be humans with emotions that deal with those things. And for you to be able to unpack how even God looks at it that same way, that's just so helpful.
Yes, if I cannot mirror Christ and show people that Christ is always better at being a human than me, then I run the risk of replicating myself. And I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to point people through my brokenness to the one who is never broken.
It's good. It's good. Well, Tim, I just want to say thank you again. It was great to just sit with a friend today and just to hear you unpack all of that. And just there was even things I wanted to talk about that we didn't even get to. And I think we're just going to have you on again for a part 2 sometime soon.
I would be honored.
That would be, well,
this has been so fun.
Let's just look at the calendar. I'm glad to hear that. Once again, Tim, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And we're just so grateful for you.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you for joining us again for another episode of Ministry Without Hating It. We hope it's helped you take a step further towards loving what you do through the wisdom of others. If you'd like to connect with our guests further, we've made ways to do so available in the episode show notes. And if you'd like to connect with us further, support the podcast, or sign up for any show updates, just go to withouthatingit.com to get started. And don't forget to subscribe to Ministry Without Hating It wherever it is that you get your podcast so you don't miss out on our future episode releases. Thanks again for listening. We'll see you next time.